Namaste and welcome back to the JavaScript series. I hope each and every one of you have been enjoying the series so far, and I am assuring you that this is just the beginning. We are going to go deep into the world of JavaScript and learn everything there is to learn. In that context, today whatever I'm going to discuss as a concept holds utmost importance in the larger scheme of things, in the larger picture of JavaScript. If you don't understand this concept, many a times JavaScript code is going to completely confuse you. Okay? What do I mean by this? Let's explore. First and foremost, let us assume I will just bring up my editor here for your reference. In the editor, I'm going to write a simple piece of code. Okay? I'll just say like this: let a equal to 100. Great. After this, first of all, you must understand, what is this line? You're creating a variable called as a and assigning a value called as 100 to it. That is what you're essentially doing, right? But what if I told you that this line can be split into two lines? What do you mean? One is called as declaration, another is called as initialization. Declaration line, initialization line. We didn't understand, Rohit. Try to understand this. The same thing I can say like this: let a, and I'll not put assignment, I'll put semicolon. Now this is called as declaration, where you're declaring in the program that, hey, I'm going to create a variable called as a. But it has no value in it. You've not initialized. Initialization is a fancy term for giving value to. You've not provided any value. In the next line, I'm going to now provide a value by telling to a, please assign the value 100. I hope you're able to understand. And friends, this line is only called as the declaration line. This line is only called as the initialization line. Declaration, initialization. But of course, we were writing it in a single line also like this. Am I clear? Wonderful. Now, let's go into some interesting things here. Look at this. In the next line, what I'm going to do is, I will now try to print this by telling console.log, and I'll print the value of a. Right? Let's execute it. So I'll just bring up my terminal within VS Code, and there if I just tell node exmp.js, of course I got the answer as 100. Great. But now I want you to see something interesting. I'll cut this line and I will put it above this. Right? Now people who are coming from the background of a different programming language, it could be Java, C, C++, right? People who come from a different programming language background will be like, this is 150% going to be an error, Rohit, because how can you reference a variable or access a variable before declaring or initializing it? You have created a after the printing statement. This is going to be an error, right? But if in case I were to now, sorry about that. If in case I were to now go and see here, I'm not getting any error, but here if I go and execute it, yes, as some of you rightly said, it is telling, hey, listen, you cannot access a before initialization, or in other words, you're getting a very common error that appears in JavaScript called as a reference error. So it is telling you can't reference a before creating and initializing it. In fact, it didn't even say creation, it didn't say declaration, it clearly said initialization. It means you can't access a before giving a value. Okay, great. We'll explore this more in detail. But another interesting thing which I would like to show you in this case is, please understand, in JavaScript, when you want to create a variable, there are actually two keywords. One is called as let, another is called as var. Let keyword, var keyword. In the past, whatever classes we have completed so far, I have never even used var for anything. I've only used let. But there is another option called as var, and I must warn you, you must only use var if you know what you're doing. Otherwise, pretend such a keyword doesn't even exist in JavaScript. Don't ever use it. But as a teacher, it is my duty to explain each and every concept to you, and hence, let me show you the second option, which is called as var. Try to understand. I'll just remove this printing line. Instead of saying let, I'll make this as var. Now in the next line, I'll try to print it. Okay. Now this is quite straightforward. If I execute it, I got 100. So you can say let a, you can say var a also. But now the interesting part is, I will cut it from here and I'm going to paste it here. Understood? Now, if I were to clear the screen and try to re-execute, Last time when the keyword was let, we had an error called as reference error. You could not access before initialization, so on and so forth. But this time when I press enter, I didn't get error. In fact, I got some output, and if you're not able to see this clearly, it's saying undefined. So it's printing a value called as undefined. Why is it that let gave us an error, but where is printing a value called as undefined? Is a question mark which will appear in the minds of any student attempting to learn JavaScript as a beginner. And my dear friends, the reason for this is because of an internal concept that JavaScript applies, which is known as hoisting. You must and should learn hoisting. What is hoisting and how does it work is going to be the discussion of this complete video. I hope all of you focus and understand what it means. Now, before I proceed with hoisting, I would like to show you one more interesting fact here. Let us assume I were to go here and just say let A, but I'll not give it any value. In other words, I won't initialize. Now in the next line, if I say console.log of A like this. Now please try to understand, this is only A, right? Now whenever you create a variable and don't assign any value to it, automatically one default value is provided by JavaScript. The default value only is what you call as undefined. So undefined is there inside it. Now if in case I were to go here and execute it, clearly you can see undefined. Same is the case with var also, right? If you have created a variable and not given it any value, automatically or the default value given to the variable is none other than undefined. In which case, if I were to go here, clear the screen, re-execute the code, you can see undefined. So what you must understand is whenever you create a variable and you don't initialize it, the default value is undefined. But if that is so, then if I go here and say var a equal to 100, and if I were to now clear the screen and execute it, you can see 100 came. But if I try to reference it even before I create or initialize, then you can see this case you got undefined. Yes, I just showed you this. But if I were to make this as let, and then if I were to execute it, you have got an error. So why is it that both the variables default value is undefined, but in the case of let, I can't access it before. In the case of var, I can access it before. Is what is the entire concept of hoisting? Let's explore. Now to understand hoisting better, let's take a simple example. As you can see, I'm first trying to print a variable a which I have not yet declared or initialized. In the next line, using the var keyword, I'm declaring and initializing a variable called as a with a value 100. After that, I'm printing the value of a, right? Now, let's try to understand how this works from the memory point of view. And if there is anybody who's watching this class directly without having looked at the previous videos, I highly recommend it, because at TAP Academy, we believe in teaching each and everything from the memory point of view, which really improves your clarity by 10x, right? So I highly recommend that. But for those of you who've been following the entire series, all of you know that when a JavaScript program executes, certain things happens inside the RAM, right? And just to give you a better idea of what I mean, please try to understand. This is the same piece of code which I'm bringing here for your reference. Whenever a JavaScript program executes, we basically have few segments in the memory which is created for the purpose of execution of the program. One is called as the stack, other is called as the heap, right? Now please try to understand, within the stack, whenever a JavaScript program begins execution, there is a region created on the stack called as the global execution context, or in short I'm calling it as GEC, global execution context. I've discussed this already previously. Now what I've not discussed is, within the global execution context, actually two things happens. So I'm just making an imaginary line here to show you two phases or two different aspects happens within the global execution context. One is called as the creation phase, other is called as the execution phase. Now, what do you mean by creation and execution phase, Rohit, you may ask. Now, try to understand. First thing that always happens is the creation phase. Now, in the creation phase, JavaScript would now go and look at the program that you have written. And what it will do is, now it will search for declarations. It will search for declarations. And if you have eyes, you can notice there is only one declaration, which is this one. I hope you're able to understand. But you have declared and initialized in the same line. Now what JavaScript will do is, JavaScript will be like, okay, programmer, I will now take this line and I will split it into two lines. I will now take this and make it into a declaration separately, and then I will make it into an initialization separately. It will split it. We wrote it as one line, it will split it into two lines. After the split, what will it do? It will now take all the declarations and it is going to move it to the top. It is going to move it to the top like this. It will take the declaration and move it to the top. In which case, this is how your code is now going to look like. The process of identifying declarations within your code and moving it to the top is what in high-fi words is called as hoisting. Hoisting means moving to the top. What are we moving to the top? Declarations. Am I clear till here? Now, please try to understand, once hoisting is done, all of your declarations is now going to be allocated memory within the stack, within the global execution context. Inside the global execution context, within the creation phases where memory allocation happens. Now it will be like, oh, I need to allocate memory for a variable called as A. It will allocate memory. Now listen to my words carefully. Look at A and tell me which keyword did you use to create A, where or let where. If you use where keyword in JavaScript, such a variable will automatically be provided a value. Whether you tell or you don't tell, the value is provided. That value is none other than undefined. Is none other than undefined. A gets undefined. Which means, tell me, is there any more declarations? No. Which means creation phase is over. Creation phase is to take all your declarations and allocate memory for it. There is only one declaration, memory is allocated. Now, the remaining lines, this printing line, this initialization line, the second printing line, all these lines will be now taken and put inside the execution phase because they need to be executed now. Understood what I'm trying to say? Now focus all of you. Now I'm in the execution phase. What is the first line? Console.log of A. Very good. I will print A. What is there inside A? Is A empty or not empty? It is not empty because what is the value inside it? Undefined. 100% in your output screen, undefined gets printed. After that, next line, assign 100 to A, initialization. Now when I assign 100 to A, one variable can store only one value, undefined gets deleted, 100 gets replaced. Now A is 100. Now the next line, again I am printing A. Again when I print A, tell me what is there inside A, undefined or 100? 100. And 100 gets printed. Hence my output screen will have two outputs, undefined followed by 100. A person who doesn't understand hoisting, doesn't understand memory, is just going to understand JavaScript at a very surface level, is why they can never become an exceptional programmer. Am I clear till here? I hope this much each and every one of you have been able to understand. Really, will this be the case? Could be the question in few of your minds. I will just show that to you. As you can see, this is my code. If I were to go here and execute, first I got undefined, then I got 100. I hope it makes sense. And the good news for you is there is always a rewind button. If there is any confusion, go and watch it once more. I'm sure all your doubts will be clarified. Now in the next example, you can notice there is only one difference here in the code. And what is the difference? Instead of where, you can clearly see I have replaced it with let. Though it may seem like a very simple difference, the difference is nothing but simple. A lot of changes happens, right? Try to understand all of you. Now, I'll just remove the editor and I'm just bringing up the same code for your reference. Now, all of you know When a JavaScript program begins execution, stack is created, heap is created. Within the stack, the first execution context which is created is called as the global execution context, or GEC, right? Now please try to understand, within the GEC there are always two phases which happens: creation phase and execution phase. Now try to understand how this actually works, okay? First of all is, first thing that JavaScript is going to do is perform something called as hoisting before creating all of the variables in the creation phase. Now, what do you mean by hoisting? Hoisting is a very simple process. JavaScript will now go and search for declarations. And here, clearly, your eyes can see there is only one declaration here. But you have declared and initialized it in the same line. JavaScript will not appreciate this. So what JavaScript will be like? Programmer, I will internally split this into two lines. Declaration separately, initialization separately, right? Now, it will find all the declarations and move it to the top, also known as hoisting. And all of you can see there is only one declaration which is now moved to the top. I hope you're able to understand. Is this much clear to all of you? Wonderful. Once hoisting is taken care of, now it will look for all the declarations and allocate memory in the creation phase. And there is only one declaration, let A. Memory for A is created inside the global execution context. Now last time, though I had not given any value, JavaScript had automatically given a value. What was the value? Undefined. That will not happen in the case of let. That is the fundamental difference between var keyword and let keyword. Var keyword is automatically initialized in JavaScript with undefined, whereas let keyword is not provided any value, not even undefined. No value is provided, which means it is empty. It is empty. It is not initialized. There is nothing inside. Now you must focus. Creation phase is over, now come to execution phase. What are the lines remaining? Printing, initialization, printing. Take these lines, put it inside the execution phase. Now execution will begin. When I say console.log A, I am trying to print the value of A. Wonderful, I want to print A, but A is empty. A is not initialized. And in any programming language in the world, you can't print or use a variable which is empty. You can't. Is why immediately in this line you will get an error called as reference error not initialized. And that is what you observed in the first example I showed you. Reference error not initialized. Am I clear till here? Yes, it is empty, not initialized, which means your program execution will stop at this point. I hope you saw the difference between var and let. Var is initialized with undefined, let is not initialized with undefined. Is this much clear to all of you? Wonderful. Will this be the case? Could be one question in your minds. For that, let me just bring up my editor. And here, if in case I were to just go and try to execute it, clearly you can see we have got an error. Reference error. Cannot access A before initialization. Correct? It can't access A before initialization, right? Because you know internally how this code would have become is like this. JavaScript would have split it into initialization and declaration, and it would have hoisted the declaration on top. I hope all of you have understood this much. Now, yes, it is created, but it is not initialized. Without initialization, you can't access. The error is here, line number 2. Is this much clear to each and every one of you? Wonderful. Let's go even more deeper into hoisting. One common interview question which is asked in JavaScript interviews is, do you know what is meant by TDZ or temporal dead zone, right? TDZ or Z, call it whatever you want, temporal dead zone. Now what is a temporal dead zone? It's related to hoisting. What do you mean related to hoisting? Try to understand. In this program, where did error come? In this line. Which is this line? Line number 2, right? This line. Now, please understand, this line, why you're getting an error is, here you have declared A, after which here you're trying to print it. But the problem here is that, I'm just marking a boundary here for your reference. The problem here is that the initialization is happening here, the declaration is happening here, and let will not have a default value like var, undefined. Because of which, unless until the initialization happens, up until this line, you can't even use this A. You can't use it anywhere. You can't use it in any form or manner. Which means this region, from declaring it till the point where you're initializing it, this region is called as a dead zone. It's called as a temporal dead zone, because though the variable was created, it cannot be utilized, it cannot be used, because it's sort of dead, because it doesn't have any value, right? So it doesn't have a soul, it's just a body, no soul, dead. Am I clear till here? Wonderful. I hope this much each and every one of you have been able to understand. But watch it. If I were to now comment this line, and now if I were to go here, I were to clear the screen, and if I were to now execute it, now I'll not get any error, because yes, I have initialized and then only used. But if I undo the comment, you can clearly see these two lines are called as TDZ, or temporal dead zone. So very easy way to identify the temporal dead zone is, if you used let, figure out where the declaration is, up until the initialization, whichever lines are there, in that region you cannot use it, and that is temporal dead zone. Hope everybody understood, right? Let's move on to the next. I hope your understanding of hoisting has become deeper, and definitely you're able to clearly see there are few differences between the where keyword and the let keyword, right? In fact, I would just like to summarize the differences in the form of a table. So what is the difference between where and let? There are two differences which you've observed so far. First difference is, where keyword when hoisted is automatically initialized in JavaScript with undefined. Whereas let keyword, even that is hoisted, but it is not initialized with undefined. First difference. Second difference is, in where keyword, when hoisted, there is no temporal dead zone. There is no part of the program where you cannot immediately access where, correct? But in the case of let keyword, there is a temporal dead zone, which means unless until we hit that line where we are initializing the let keyword, up until that you cannot be accessing let. You can't immediately access it. There is a temporal dead zone, right? So these are the fundamental two differences between where and let when we are talking about hoisting. Am I clear till here? Now, before I proceed, I would like to show you one more thing. Now, people who come from other programming language backgrounds will be like this. Watch it. Assume I create one function. I'll just call this function as greet function, and inside this, inside this I'll just go and quickly print one message, console.log, and maybe within double quotes I'll just say hello, like this. I'm just greeting, right? Now this is only technically called as a function declaration. You're declaring a function, right? Its name, its parameters, its body, all of that. Now, usually what happens is, only after declaring a function you can access it or call it, like this. Am I right? And if in case I were to go here, clear the screen from the previous output, and if I were to execute it, yes, you got hello. But in JavaScript, imagine I now take this call and put it above the declaration. Now, people coming from other programming languages immediately say, how can you call a function and then declare error? But in JavaScript, I think you can already predict, if I were to execute, no error. Reason, hoisting. Now, how does hoisting apply to this, you may ask? Again, let me show you. This is the same piece of code, right? Now, please try to understand. First thing that happens in JavaScript is, you have your stack, you have your heap. In that, global execution context is created, which has two phases, creation and execution. Now, before the creation phase, hoisting happens. What is hoisting? Identifying all the declarations and moving it to the top. In this case, the function declaration is also a declaration, my friends. Even this is also a declaration only. Am I clear? So now what JavaScript will do is, in its hoisting process, it will take the function declaration, move it on top. Now when it moves it on top, please tell me, is the call first or the declaration first? Declaration. That is why it works. Understood? Now it will take all the declarations and put it inside the creation phase, which means this greet function's declaration comes in the creation phase. Wonderful. What is remaining is this call. This line is taken and put inside the execution phase. Now in the execution phase, when I call greet, those of you who have been attending classes regularly knows, whenever a function is called in JavaScript, on the stack, one region is created called as the execution context. which is further again divided into two parts, creation phase and execution phase. In creation phase, it will now go inside this function and see whether there is any hoisting required. There is no variable declaration, nothing. So no hoisting is required. This printing line is taken, put inside the execution phase, right? Now when the execution phase starts, there is only one line, console.log, where I'm printing hello, hello gets printed. That's it. Once that is printed, there is no more statements inside the greet function. Its execution context is removed. Control comes back to the global execution context. Is there any more lines to execute inside the execution phase? No, even the global execution context gets removed. Stack becomes empty, program stops, right? So I hope each and every one of you understood today's class. Hoisting is extremely important. I want all of you to go back and practice. By watching me code, you cannot become a programmer. Please ensure you are practicing as well. Thank you so much. And once again, if you're enjoying the videos and if you're seeing the effort that goes behind creating such world-class content, I would highly recommend you to share this video with your friends, like, subscribe, and a small comment which will keep the entire team motivated. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you in the next class.